With the iPad Pros that are being announced next week, more and more people are going to be looking to replace their laptops with iPads. I'm looking at whether or not an iPad could be a laptop replacement for a photographer. I'm going to be comparing the desktop version of Affinity Photo with the iPad version to see what's the same and what's different. So first we're going to be comparing the import process between the iPad and the Mac. On the Mac, you put your SD card in, you make a folder, you drag and drop the files from your SD card onto the folder. It's pretty self-explanatory. You've done it, I've done it, everybody's done it. The alternative is that you use Photos, which has a very iOS-like interface where you just either click import all or you select individual photos and import them. On the iPad, you plug in the Lightning to SD card adapter. So once you open up the Photos app on the iPad, you're greeted with the exact same window as you have on Photos on the Mac. So you get to choose whether to import all the photos or to import selected photos. For me, it's much slower because I have the USB 2.0 little dongle to connect the SD card, so it's not nearly as quick as on my Mac, but if you buy the USB 3 one, then it works just as good. So now that you have all your files on the MacBook, you either drag and drop from Finder directly into Affinity, or you go into the Photos app, you right click, click Edit In, and you click Edit in Affinity. On the iPad, you open up Affinity Photo, click the plus, import. In this case, we'll import from Photos, and you click on the photo you'd like to import. And ta-da, you're all done. So starting editing on both, you're placed right into the develop persona where you're able to do slight adjustments, slider adjustments, easy stuff like that. Basic raw adjustments that you need to do to a photo in order to make it look good. It's very similar on both, and honestly you won't notice much of a difference in the develop persona. Once you enter the photo persona, that's where you can start to see some of the differences. Mainly in interface though, that's the only thing, is that the makers of Affinity have made the iPad app very useful for finger touch. That's the only difference that I've found between the two. All the features seem to be the same to me. They're all both useful, but you have to learn them individually. They're not the same. And overall, I say that they did a pretty good job of making the iPad version touch friendly. I never feel like the iPad's actually holding me back for having a touch screen when I'm editing the photos. Sometimes I actually feel it's more natural than editing with a mouse, just because you can use your fingers, you can zoom, you can do stuff like that. When you're on your mouse, you don't really always know what the right gesture is. These positives for editing with touch are made much better once you start using Apple Pencil, whatever my Apple Pencil is. So in my opinion, by far the best thing about the iPad Pro and Affinity is the integration with the Apple Pencil. You can basically use it for anything that you use your mouse for, and that's the best part about editing with the iPad. If you have an Apple Pencil, I'd highly recommend buying Affinity. It's not that expensive, and every single thing that you want to use a pencil for, you can use it for. You can use it to select stuff, you can use it to draw, you can use it to mask, you can use it basically for anything. And as you can see in my video here, I'm much better at drawing with the Apple Pencil than I am with a mouse and a keyboard. It's just a much more natural thing. You've probably been doing it all your life using a pen or a pencil of some sort. So trust me, if you're buying Affinity just because you like art and you're deciding whether you should go for a MacBook and buy Affinity on the Mac, or go for an iPad and buy a pencil, definitely go for the iPad just because the integration with the Apple Pencil is perfect. So once you've edited your photos like you want, you need to export them. On the Mac, you go to File, Export what you want, and you're all done. You can export exactly which format you want and what quality you want and where, just like normal, like every single photo app. If you're on the iPad, you have to click the little page in the left corner, click export, choose your settings, and export. And that's the only real difficulty I run into when I'm editing on the iPad with comparison to the Mac. You don't have as many options for exporting and managing the files that you want. I don't care what you say, iOS's file management just isn't as good as macOS's. You don't have a full Finder. You have this Files app, which kind of works, It doesn't work as well. You can't drag and drop as easy, you can't copy files as easy, and you have much less options than you do on the MacBook. So overall, the iPad can basically do everything that the desktop version of Affinity can. You're not missing that much, but there's still some glaring omissions, like you can't batch edit on an iPad, which just seems like a stupid omission to me. I find it really useful when I go out and take a bunch of pictures of my friends or anything like that, that's all the exposure is about the same. Just be able to batch edit a bunch of them at once just saves you a ton of time. But you can't do that on the iPad. And when I was using the iPad as my main editor for about 3 months, I definitely felt that it was holding me back a little bit in that regard. Like I had to edit individually, so I would spend about 3 hours editing pictures of me and my friends. Just applying all the same exposure adjustments, saturation adjustments, that sort of stuff, I'd have to do it individually, which left sometimes slightly different exposures on 2 different pictures, so it didn't work as good as batch editing. And I'd like to move to a full iPad workflow. I think for actually editing the photo, using your hands and using the Apple Pencil is more enjoyable. It's just you can't quite do it with the way that the iPad and Affinity are right now. Maybe the next version of the iPad, or eventually they'll update the Affinity to have batch support. You just can't fully work on the iPad and not have a MacBook, in my opinion. That's not for everybody though. If you only take some photos, maybe your friends, your family, or you just do some photos for Instagram or something like that, it probably would work for you, and it probably would work better in some situations than the MacBook. But for me at least, it's not as good. But with Adobe software on its way and the next generation of iPads coming out, I think that mobile editing as a whole is the best it's ever been. And for you, it might just be perfect.